So this story happened about 11 years ago. I was a senior in high school at the time, but it is the single most mind-boggling thing that I have ever experienced. It's also important to note that it happened in mid-December. I am from Iowa, and the winters here get cold at night. Like if you get stuck outside you will die kind of cold. That plus the snowfall makes everything dead silent. You can hear anything and everything inside the house and even immediately outside of it. Well, me and my best friend were hanging out in my family's walkout basement, just having a boring winter night playing video games. We were also the only ones home. The reason it was just us is because my mother went from work straight to a bar to grab a few drinks with co-workers, so me and my friend thought it would be a good idea to break into the family wine and live a little. As we were sitting there opening up the first bottle, I hear the door to the garage open and slam shut. I immediately go oh shit and start looking for places to hide the bottle. My friend then says, "I thought you said your mom was supposed to be out all night?" "She was," I replied. I then heard a few heavy stomps and hear my mother yell out, "Meows and boo. Anyone home?" I yell back up the stairs, "Yup. Just hanging out in the basement." I hear a few more steps move from the garage door towards the stairs and she yells out again, "Can you come help me with something? I need you up here." I reply back while frantically trying to find a good place to hide the wine bottle, "Yup. Give me just a minute." Then there was silence for about 20 seconds. "Anyone down there with you?" She yelled back in a more concerned, serious tone, in a voice that was slightly off of my mother's. This was the first thing that told me something wasn't right. Our family never cared if anyone was over, as our house was a very open house to all family and friends, and the voice, it was just wrong. Like it sounded like my mother's, but it was missing something that I couldn't out my finger on. "Weirded out," I reply back, "Just Colton." After I yelled that back to her, I found a good place to hide the bottle and began walking up the steps to the next level. Now as I was walking up the steps I couldn't help but feel the overbearing silence of the house, and the slight electric twinge that something isn't right. When I got to the top of the steps I look over to where the door to garage is and also the kitchen right next to it, and it's black, pitch black, all if the lights were off, and there was no moonlight shining through any windows. I walked over to the kitchen yelling out, "Mom, where are you?" There was no reply, just silence and darkness. I feel the electric twinge turn into full needles, and my adrenaline kicking in full force. I have to get out of here as fast as possible. My mother was not home. I run back down the stairs grabbing my coat along the way. "What's wrong?" Colton says. "My mum's not home," I reply as fast as I can. "Looking for my truck keys?" "What do you mean? You were just talking with her?" I could see the confusion in his face. "There's no one home, we need to leave now." I took a few steps towards the back door that opens up to the yard, and then I see my dog shaking on the couch, and my cat growling behind it. I couldn't leave them, I just knew that if we left something would happen. "Are we leaving?" Colton said, still confused as all hell. "No, I can't leave them here alone, something is really off. I'm going to call my mum and figure this out." I pull out my phone and call my mum. She picks up immediately. "Meows and boo. What's going on?" She answers. "Mum, were you just home? I heard you yelling for me from the second level, and when I went up you weren't there?" I said frantically, hoping that she was playing a joke. "No, I'm just leaving the bar, I wasn't feeling very well. Are you okay?" "What do you mean you heard me?" I fill her in on the whole story and she rushes home. Colton and I stayed in the basement with the animals until she got home, but before she did you could hear something upstairs, not walking or sitting on things, but a pressure in the air, like a black hole was slowly moving from one room to the next, and the word that I would instinctively describe it as is hungry. When she got home you could feel the thing leave just as quick as it came, like an overbearing predatory presence had just flown away. We still have never figured out what the hell was going on, and this is just one story of many unexplainable things that have happened to us. but this is the easiest to write down, and one that I was happy to have a witness. My mother has passed away now, and I have moved away to Arizona, but whenever I go back to Iowa and I see Colton, he still gets creeped out by what had happened. I will never truly know what happened, but I know that whatever it was that had my mother's voice, it was evil, and it was hungry. I guess this could be considered a handful of paranormal stories. So I guess here goes. Also, sorry in advance, this is a bit of a long one. I've lived in southwestern Ohio my entire life and lived in the same house up until a couple of years ago when my family decided to sell it. I'm 21 now, but this story occurred a few years ago when I was about 17 and lived with just my mother in this house. This house was in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Butler County, trying to stay vague but give a good idea of the area. There were always weird and unexplainable things that would happen in the house, and I've always been relatively paranoid and I suffer from chronic anxiety, so I would always try to find a logical reason behind things moving and falling or knocking and thumping noises, but there were a handful of incidents that couldn't be explained by any rational or logical thought and hypothesis. I was home alone rather often and would tend to lock myself in my room whenever I was home alone, especially once it got dark out, and I typically refused to leave the room or the upstairs till someone else was there. I would like to give a kind of layout of the house to help give a better understanding of things, and would also like to note that I have heightened senses, especially hearing and feel, touch. Upon entering the front door there was a hallway straight ahead leading to the kitchen. In that hallway leading to the kitchen was the downstairs half bathroom. To the left of the door, no more than a few steps, were the stairs leading up and the archway leading into the dining room. From the dining room there was, to the right, a sort of living room. It was smaller and we usually used this as a storage room in the later years of living there, so it had various boxes filled with toys and belongings, a big round coffee table in the middle, and my old dollhouse that was battery powered as it had functioning sounds, lights, and even a little doorbell on the front of it. From this room you could enter the kitchen to the right. The kitchen hid an island that was directly in front of the hallway leading to the front door. The basement door was to the left of this hallway or on your right if you continued straight, and if you did so you'd also pass the pantry on your right, next to the hallway, and the garage door, again to the right. Then, directly in front of you would be the family room. It had two skylights, a brick fireplace, and to the left the sliding glass door leading out to the back patio and yard. At the top of the stairs, immediately to your left, was the master bathroom, and directly in front of you was a bedroom we also used as storage in later years. If you turned to the right, there was the bathroom, and across from it, the linen closet. Continuing straight and off to your left was another bedroom door right next to the linen closet, and then at the end of the hall was my bedroom for the most part in the last couple of years. This bedroom was right above the garage, and oftentimes I could hear and feel when the front door, garage door and garage were being opened and closed. I could usually feel and hear the basement door open and close, too. I never felt any cars or pickup trucks passing by on the quiet neighborhood road outside, though. Just the UPS truck or the rump truck. The basement, though, had narrow wooden stairs leading down to a small landing that stepped down onto the concrete basement floor on either side. If you went to the right and basically did a U-turn, you could walk back to the washer and dryer area. To the right of this area was a crawl space that always freaked me out. Unfortunately for me, this basement is where two of my most unfortunate and terrifying stories happened. Now that that's out of the way, a lot of the times when I'd be home alone I'd listen to music, whether by speaker or by earbuds, and play games on my PS4 at the time. A lot of times I'd hear or feel weird thumps, shaking, vibrations and other noises. There were a couple of times I swear I heard talking, and a few times where the thumps I heard and or felt were big enough and loud enough to cause me to grab the house phone or my phone and a weapon of some sort before I left my room to check out the house, and eventually found nothing. It's worthy to note that while I had a cat, he was always in the room with me whenever I locked myself in there, as he would freak out if he couldn't get to me. He would also react to things around the house that myself and no one else could see, but it was very obvious he was staring at something and angrily arching his back and or growling and hissing. He's very protective of me and would only do this if I was nearby. Otherwise he never reacted this way when he was with my mum when she would be alone downstairs. For the most part things that happened in the house were never malicious, but every now and then stuff like dishes shifting without any prompting, whether by vibration or otherwise, panda things just up and falling off counters and tables, or thumping in the living room would suddenly cause an overwhelming nauseated feeling for me and strong fear, like something really wasn't happy and it was quite obviously making its presence known and or felt like it was just staring me down. With the most hateful feeling ever. One of my favorite group of incidents, though, were when the toys and things, not the dollhouse, would shift or thump in the living room. They were always smaller and it always seemed like there was something playful in the living room, and I would often hear it while sitting on the couch with Siren in the family room. The dollhouse, however, had the same batteries in it for the longest time, and every now and then I would pass through the living room and all the lights would be on in it, and sometimes noises would be going, or if be on the couch watching TV and I'd just hear the doorbell ring and Siren would get off his cat tower in front of the sliding glass door or off the couch in my lap to go check it out. Every now and then he would freak out over this and come running back to me. I swear, the dollhouse creeped me out. Though when it would start making noise or everything would just turn on, especially the doorbell when it would just ring out of nowhere. Oftentimes I would hear footsteps upstairs or going up and down the stairs when no one else was there, and it was obvious the difference between my cat running around and footsteps by the way the thuds and frequency would sound. Sometimes we thought it was my mother's grandfather who had passed before I was born, as we would find pennies, he would always talk about them and finding them, or there was a very comforting and almost playful presence that encompassed some of these events. One of my most noteworthy and weird incidents right before moving out was when I was sitting on the floor in the family room in front of our old, wooden, square coffee table. I was between it and the fireplace. I had just eaten an instant Maruchan ramen cup and had left it empty and sitting on the coffee table a good 3 or so inches from the edge as I was cleaning and hadn't gone to throw away trash yet. I was facing the table and all of a sudden the styrofoam cup just flies off the table in my general direction like it had been smacked. I remember trying to find every possible way this could have happened, but I ultimately came up with nothing and just shrugged it off. I believe this was the last incident to have occurred. Now that I've given a good amount of backstory and whatnot, the incident that occurred when I was about 17. Despite being utterly freaked out by the basement, I for some reason thought it would be a good idea to make it my room. This was very brief and for good reasons. I also remember that a good amount of others' basements never really freaked me out like ours did. My bed was to the right of the stairs if you were coming down then. I had a bookcase right beside it as well that was between me and the landing at the bottom of the stairs. For the most part I never really felt anything other than mild discomfort, except for one night when I was alone and then another night when I had USO who lived with me. The first night, I had stayed up relatively late as I was having trouble falling asleep due to my insomnia. My mum had already come to say goodnight and went upstairs to her room to go to bed. I think this was around 2 or 3 a.m., though I don't remember the time too well as I can't quite envision things and memories like you might be able to. I had finally grown sleepy, so I turned off all the lights and laid down, checking the time and saying goodnight to a few people before doing so. I recall laying there on my stomach all bundled up listening to some music. After a while of growing more and more tired and nearing sleep, all of a sudden I had this overwhelming sense of fear come over me. It felt like something was behind me at the foot of my bed just staring me down. I slowly checked my phone and realized I wasn't more than 43 minutes into trying to sleep and I had most definitely not fallen asleep by this point. I remember pulling my phone in towards me, underneath the blankets and turning it down to listen, though I don't think I heard anything. The feeling of being stared at became even more intense and I gripped my childhood stuffed animal tighter. I had no clue where my cat was at this point. He must have been upstairs still because I hadn't seen him in hours and my mum had fed him for me before bed but he never came down after. I slowly slipped my blankets above my head and pulled them tight as I felt safer this way. The feeling kept growing more and more intense to the point I felt pure terror, you know. The kind that completely paralyzes you because you're so terrified. I had never felt any kind of fear, anxiety or terror like this before and I absolutely could not move. All of a sudden whatever I felt was at the foot of my bed staring at me felt like it began moving closer, moving around the edge of the bed to the side I was on until it felt like it was right there, next to me just leaning over me to get as close as it could with the bookcase in the way. I was not religious at the time but my grandparents had given me a cross that I wore around my neck and I remember shifting just enough to tightly grasp it with my free hand while I began crying. I ended up falling asleep at some point during this and I have no clue how long it lasted but when I woke up in the morning I immediately grabbed my blankets and pillows and put them on the couch upstairs. Siren was beside me when I woke up. He had situated himself between me and the edge of the bed where I'd felt whatever it was standing there. He followed me closely as I went upstairs as well around the house for a few days after and for a few nights after he seemingly slept between myself and the edge of the couch as if he was staying between myself and whatever could get to me. The second incident happened when my bed was still in the basement as I hadn't moved it back upstairs yet. My now ex and I had gone to bed, again, late and had turned out all the lights. We were listening to music via my phone and as we were getting closer to sleep, all of a sudden that same feeling of fear began to creep over me. I was sleeping on my stomach and my ex on their back. As the feeling began to wash over me, they pulled me closer and the blankets up over us. The feeling of fear grew into terror again and we were both afraid to move. I remember asking if they felt it too and they whispered yes and that's when the feeling of terror fully hit. After that morning I moved all my stuff out of the basement and never really went down there again till it was time to clean up the house and move out. I have no clue what it was that was down there with me but I am certain there was something especially as I'd been consistently taking my anti-anxiety meds that helped and would completely take away my anxiety. I don't suffer from sleep paralysis and never have, I only suffer from night terrors. I have had a few pretty nasty night terrors about this incident and in every single one of them I saw a black figure that was as void of light as a black hole except for two red or white dots where I'd assume eyes were. This was and still is the most terrifying couple of events I've ever been through out of my entire life and what I remember. I genuinely don't think I'll ever have a more terrifying experience. I don't think I'll ever know what was down there with me but I know for certain something else was there and that its intentions were not good in any way and I'm certain if I had gone against my instincts and looked, I would have been met with something more than unkind and more terrifying than the feeling I got from it. Thinking and typing about it now I still become fearful and get just a twinge of terror welling up in my chest and I hope I never have to experience that again as it's stronger than any anxiety or PTSD meltdown I have ever had. If you got through all of this, thank you for reading and I'm glad I could share this story with you. A bit of advice? Please always trust your instincts, especially if they tell you not to do something or go somewhere. It's probably for the better and could help prevent something like this or a terrifying encounter with a person.